So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us for this International Economics Roundtable. My name is Pierre. I'm an interdisciplinary student doing MIA first year, and I also work as a student collaborator at the Alumni Office with Karine Le, who's with us today. Before we start, so for the attendees joining online, you can put yourself on grid view to see everyone on WebEx and use the Q&A function to ask questions. For the people here, you'll be able to just directly ask questions in the Q&A part. This roundtable is part of the very first edition of an Alumni Week, which aims to connect the Institute's alumni with its current students. So you're the third roundtable that we have this week. On Monday, we had ANSO and International History, and on Wednesday, we had IRPS. It's a collaboration with the Career Services and the Professional Development Committee, so we thank them for their support. And I'm just going to start by introducing each panelist, and then we'll move on to the question. So our first panelist today is Florian Egli, which is a senior researcher and lecturer at ETH Zurich. Then we have Satoshi Araki, who's here with us in Geneva. And he currently works on labor market issues as a junior economist at the OECD. Then we have Divya Rai, who's an independent fitness and nutrition specialist, joining us from India. And we have Pulkit Bajpai, who's a consultant at the World Bank and a data manager at Resolve Sales Lives, a global public health initiative focusing on cardiovascular diseases and epidemics. Now I'm going to leave the floor to Professor Till, who has agreed to moderate this event for us. We thank you very much. Please feel free to start asking the questions.
Well, thank you very much for this kind of introduction. Welcome to everyone taking part. It's a pleasure to spend this time with you, to have this discussion with our alumni. The way we're going to proceed, I will start by putting out a general question to alumni, and I will go in turn to all of them. And after that, I will come back to each panelist with a more specific question. So my general question is I'll be happy to hear about how the skills and training in economics that you acquired in your studies here have been helpful for you in your specific job. And I propose that I go in the order of people in the document and starting with Florian. So Florian, if you can give us your insights on that. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I think I'll keep it rather short because I want to leave some time for questions afterwards. So I'm working in academia at the moment. I also do a lot of political stuff, but my main job is in academia. So I mean, of course, I use a lot of the skills that I've learned about at the Graduate Institute. But still, I think kind of like I thought about this, and I think like studying econ, two things came to mind. One is to conceptualize things. Now, I do it differently compared to back when I studied, because economics is very much, you try conceptualizing things by putting things in equations and making, making trade-offs or concepts visible by looking at equations. And I think this is kind of a school of thought that I really appreciated, although I kind of moved away from doing too much maths and equation stuff, but still the actual, looking at a complex phenomenon, try to break it down into bits and pieces and kind of try to understand what are the causal chains that cause some of the effects we're observing. So I think this came as a first thing. And as a second thing, and it's linked to that, is kind of to rationalize a lot of the developments we're seeing in this world, right? I think particularly because it's international economics, because it's small groups and because it's a lot of interactions with international organizations, I think I've really and I can use that now, like be it in like make sense of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, for example, like what's going on there. I think like a lot of it is there is a factor of explanation is economics, and I think if you have a knowledge of that helps you actually get a certain credibility in discussions. So I would always almost think that as the more you engage in discussions, the better you get in this, and the more credibility you have afterwards if you speak to a diverse audience. So these are the two things that came to my mind.
Thank you very much, Florian. Now I turn to our second panelist with the same question. So Satoshi, we'll be happy to hear from you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Oh, it's the... Oh, okay,
So
okay,
it's a
okay.
bit of an echo, yeah.
Sorry. Thanks for everyone coming in. Yeah, so currently, before like explaining what kind of experience like at the institute helped me the most, I'll explain what I do in the current position. So I work as a junior economist. I work on the labor market issues in the Employment, Labor, Social Affairs Directorate. And the last year, I worked on the impact of COVID-19 crisis on the labor market. And this year, I'm also working for the forthcoming employment outlook, which is going to be about the impact of the labor market concentration, that the monopsony power of the employers in setting the wage for the employees. So those are the things what I'm doing. So the most useful thing I would say that I have acquired at the institute is really to be able to perform policy analysis with data. For example, for instance, I briefly mentioned, I analyzed the impact of COVID-19 crisis on labor markets, which is not really about the, running a regression or running RCT on trying to see, whether we can establish like a, rigorous causality or not, but it's more like a descriptive thing, but like evaluating what kind of like non-pharmaceutical interventions are adopted in each member state, because we have a member state of 38, and to see how those performances and how those policy interventions are actually linked to the performance in the labor market, and try to see to have the connection, because many different countries have different ways to go through this pandemic, and that is which is also reflected in the respective labor market. So I had to do a fair amount of like data work and also like a literature review, but it was also, I have to say, it was just, I wouldn't say it was a mere extension, but it's a really like a glorified like an extension of what I used to do in the at the institute. Not just in compulsory courses like electric courses, but also I did a project with the Professor Ugo for the Inter-American Development Bank on the impact of the relationship between the corruption indicators and the sovereign rating, and also did my master's thesis with my supervisor, Martina Verenko, to evaluate the impact of the school funding on the migrant background children. So those are the things that I worked on at the institute, and although I currently work on more like a general, more like a descriptive things, but there are so many things you can still say about descriptive, and to create a narrative and with a the stronger data backbone, and say what kind of like a policy interventions are needed in each country, to be able to say to draft and promote some of the policy recommendations are really a sort of thing I was able to acquire at the institute. Yeah, through the education at the institute. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Satoshi. And we now move to our third panelist, Divya. So I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Professor. Hello, everyone. So I would first introduce myself a little bit. Currently, I'm working as an independent fitness and nutrition specialist. Prior to this, I was working in the field of brand management, which is right after my graduation from the institute. So some things that I really noticed and figured out that everyone spoke about was the skills that we get at the institute, which really helped me in my further job professions. For example, the skills are really transferable, the skills that we gain by studying economics. For example, the analytical skills or the problem solving skills. So these are the kind of skills that really help me to move on to different job professions, because economics as a social science can be combined with different disciplines while you move to different disciplines, and you can transfer those same skills like analytical and problem solving skills to the different set of professions. So I used my economics with the management field and landed up as a profession, as the job profession of a brand manager in a private sector industry. Moving on, I moved on now that I've more closer to my vision. Now I'm an independent practitioner. So I'm also using those analytical and problem solving and strategic skills to choose the city that I've currently chosen to go independent, which is a tier 2 city in India, which is where the growth potential is more than a tier 1 city, because most of the fitness professionals and the fitness companies, the market is already saturated. So for me, the growth potential is more in a tier 2 city, which I could only understand because I studied economics at the institute. So that is from my side.
Thank you, Divya. I'm very happy to hear that teaching of the optimization approach is proved to be so useful in practice. Now I'll turn to our final panelist, Pilkit, if you can tell us about your experience.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think, given that I work primarily in applied economic research and causal inference and looking at administrative data to assess impact of policies in sub-Saharan Africa and Iraq, I think the kind of theoretical foundations through coursework and also like proficiency in statistical languages through multiple coursework has been really helpful, primarily because what I do currently is an extension of that. And I think it provided an exceptional foundation for me to improve my skills and also my theoretical foundations. I also think it was very helpful given how the program is structured and how time intensive it is to really become better at time management and return key deadlines at work, and especially in an academic environment where you have quick turnaround times on academic articles and things like that. I also found it to be very helpful that we're in a bilingual environment and I work in West Africa, and I think being in a bilingual environment at the institute really helped me prepare for also being in a French-speaking work setup. And I think one of the key factors of my journey at the institute and the program was peer learning and group learning from my batchmates, which I thought contributed immensely to how I've grown professionally and also what I've learned from the program itself and in terms of coursework and outside that. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, now the second round, I'm going to direct some questions more specifically at each panelist. So we'll go in the same order and start it with Florian. So you have a broad range of experience spanning academia, but also advocacy. And I would be curious to hear, if there are some skills that are more needed in one than another. And as a related question, many of our students will then go on to do academic career. What is it that they should be particularly aware and paying attention to?
Yes, thanks a lot. I think, the first, maybe one thing I forgot, and it's also very, very linked to when you work in less academic environments. So you use the term advocacy. I think that's some of what I do, but also just in general, a lot of, I co-founded a few, social initiatives that are working with members of parliament, for example. So, it's working on social issues, but it's working in a quite, I would say, professional context. I'm not organizing demonstrations, but rather actually working in very close contact with policymakers. And in that sense, I think the most important for me is interpersonal skills. So it's really, when you actually assemble a team that is supposed to do something, to really figure out, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each team member, including myself, and really trying to, focus on the strength there is oftentimes, there's not an ideal person to do a certain task, but you can, start working with a person and then figure out, okay, what's this person best at? And then, try to organize yourself so that this is actually possible. And I think this really goes into the sense of what you said, Pulkit, in terms of teamwork and in terms of group work at the Institute, which I think is extremely interesting, because a lot of these, I remember doing these problem sets especially in the first semester, and everybody goes crazy, and you sit together at 10 in the evening and there's 5 of you, and you need to somehow organize yourself, right? You need to figure out how to do this, because you're stronger as a group. You're much stronger. There's this one genius guy who might figure it out himself or herself, but as a group you probably beat all of them. So I think this is really the core of it. I think if you can put together a nice group of people that focuses on strengths, I think that's the key thing. And the other thing, again, particularly if you work on something that is somehow linked to politics, I think is persistence. Persistence beats everybody. So you outrun people, not by starting fast, but by keep going, right? So, and that's crucial. I think, just there's a lot of drawbacks, and that's actually similar in academia. Like, so many of my paper get rejected here and there, and then eventually, one gets through without issues, but it's really the exception. So it's persistence. It's actually believing in what you do, staying in there, and keep banging the same door again and again if you're really convinced that what you do makes sense. And I think that's also something that I sometimes link to my experience in Geneva, because sometimes it was tough and you have to hang in there. And I think that's something that you learn as well, and that it's super useful. On academic careers, I think, the most important for me is always, I think it makes sense to follow your passion. I think it makes sense to work on the things that you really consider issues. Academia tends to work, in my perception, too much in silos. So we tend to evaluate people according to very disciplinary, thinking patterns, meaning on, what's good and bad science, what are limitations or not, what are publications that count, or does it count at all? So it's a very disciplinary, a very siloed environment. And I think, for me personally, I would probably become unhappy. So I think but it gives you the opportunity to focus on your passion. Like you have a lot of freedom. So I would just encourage you to use it if you're going into academia, and not be, frightened or constrained by the very siloed structure of academia. And the second one, and I think it's important too, I always give the example of the Brazilian soccer players. So don't bet everything on academia. So don't follow the Brazilian soccer player that starts playing soccer at 3 and just throws his whole life in it and doesn't get an education, and then like 1 out of 10,000 ends up playing for Real Madrid. But the whole rest really struggles, right? So, and I think in academia it's kind of the same. It's a similar trap, right? Because it's interesting, because it's a passion, you can just go in there and dig real deep and lose yourself, and all of a sudden you wake up and there is no career opportunity. So I think it's really important, at least in the beginning, if there's no clear path, to have different options and really not only focus on that.
Thank you, Florian. Yeah, so I can second like the importance of having persistence and not let yourself get discouraged when one project doesn't work as well as you expected, but to keep going. Let me now turn to Satoshi. So Satoshi, you're working at the OECD, one of many large policy institutions that there are. What I would be curious to hear from you, so this institution hire graduates from a broad range of universities and schools. And did you feel that there was something in the equipment you get from the graduate institute that was really particularly useful, and that you get more than your fellow economists from other backgrounds did? And what also, are there any skills that you think are particularly relevant from working in this large policy-focused institution?
Yes, yeah, this is actually a very difficult question, because I actually haven't got to work with colleagues who's in the same rate of like fresh graduate with me. So I haven't really got much opportunity to sort of compare myself with the other colleagues in the same similar position to see, what kind of how my skill set is different from theirs. But what I can tell is that I think at the Institute, I was really able to have an opportunity to learn what the causality is, like how you can actually establish a causality link. Well, of course, we have the lecture, lecture of impact evaluation by Jean-Louis Acan, where you have to learn a lot of the mechanics and to see how you can actually what kind of methodology you can actually use to see the causality. But also I also took the class of my supervisor Martina Viarenko's development economics economics, where you really have to like read a lot of like classics in the economics papers and see like how, you know, the previous research actually tried to, you know, establish the causality link to see, you know, some of the policy interventions actually make sense and, you know, made a way for, you know, to achieve a development goal and whatnot. And also I attended a lecture from IRPS called Survey Experiment by Professor Sun-Min Ro, and it's really about like, how you design a survey to see like to actually, it's actually quite difficult because when you create a survey, you think that there will be people answer this and answer. So there must be some, you know, by doing RCT-esque, you know, experiment in the survey, but there are actually still a lot of noises when you're doing it. And, you know, in economists, you know, a lot of economists literature, and also, you know, as an economist student, you know, when you are given opportunity to run a regression and we are told that this is the RCT, and if you run the regression, oh, this coefficient is a positive, statistically significant, so this led to this. We tend to say that, but it's actually not really simple. For example, in my master's, for my master's thesis, I evaluate the impact of school resources that is specifically targeted at non-native English speakers in English schools, and to see like how their, you know, like educational attainment, well, measured as a test scores improved, but like, yes, the more funding, I found that, you know, as a highly, you know, statistically significant with the improved educational attainment, but that doesn't really mean that, you know, because they got the money, they might have done something, but we actually don't know. So like, I might have made a you know, causality link between the school funding and the improved you know, scores, but the way this, you know, the school resources are utilized in each school is actually not observable. So there is no, you know, I can't, that's the end of my, you know, causality discussion. So, you know, to have that sort of, you know, that experience, you know, in a, you know, in our cons lessons, in our compulsory classes, in elective classes, to really, you know, explore, you know, what is, you know, the relevant, you know, policy intervention in a specific context. Because at the end of the day, policy is a really context specific, and you have to know the context to be able to say something. It's not really just about, you know, coefficient being, you know, statistically positive or not, which is a really, you know, nice thing to have, but that's not the end of the story. So I was really able to learn that at the institute. So I think that was really a great experience for me to do. If I may add, if there is any time left.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I would add also a bit of sort of like, I wouldn't say weakness, but like some of the like missed opportunities for economist students at the institute, which is that we do a lot of compulsory classes and electives, but we don't have like much opportunity to learn the content in general. But what we have trade, we have finance, we have development economics as a track. So those are, I assume, they're relatively fine. But for example, my like specialization, which I don't know why I got the position, but labor economics, I know it's offered at the UniJ, but I didn't have an opportunity to take that. So I had to learn so hard to catch up with my colleagues because I really didn't, well, I didn't do labor economics and even at undergrad level, let alone at the master's level. So even now I still have to study because my colleagues have published, my colleagues have published in, you know, labor economics, you know, American, you know, economics of review, like, you know, those like very reputable ones. And it's really, to be honest, you know, hard to catch up with like really intellectual people. And so, yeah, like, and a lot of so in my, for example, division, I have a lot of colleagues from like Paris School of Economics or like other, you know, Harvard, you know, the economics student from Harvard and Princeton, you know, they really, they're really technically advanced as well, but they also have something to say about politics. And, you know, some people have a, you know, better understanding of the, you know, cross-cutting setting, which is really essential if you want to talk about policies in a cross-country, context. So those are the things, maybe that's something you cannot just, learn just by taking courses. That's something you have to learn like actively while you're here. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
Thanks,
it's a little
Satoshi.
bit long. Yeah.
No worries. So yes, that's the challenge of being small places, as we would like to offer a broader range, but we have to do within our means, if I can put it that way. This said, I always encourage you, to talk to students or your advisor or the faculty, and they can point you to ways to explore some interests that may not be on specific classes. So totally second your point that one of the challenges in doing policy is, you get the data, but you have to understand what it means and what is economic mechanisms. That reminded me of something my undergraduate economics professor used to say, that he didn't want us to do button pushing econometrics. So it's fine to have data or give you the results, but then you have to see, okay, what is the mechanism I'm getting? Let me now move to Divya. So I'd be curious to hear, you have an experience in the private sector. And the first part of my question is actually something you already alluded to, of the skill that you found to be particularly transferable across occupation. But I'd like to go a bit deeper on that, and particularly I'd be interested in hearing from you about what are the aspects you think that a student aiming at the private sector should be particularly mindful of.
All right. So it's a very interesting question, and I really I'm really interested to answer this one. So one thing, just that one particular thing that everybody entering into the private sector should be mindful about is that the ultimate goal of a private sector organization will always be profit making. So if you're someone, and most of us at the institute who really care about the developmental aspects of the society. So if you have to be really mindful about that, because somewhere down the line, when you're working in that private sector organization, there would be differences and clashes in your morals, because a lot of times, even the human resources as employees in the organizations, your basic needs, or even like your emotions and everything, is overlooked at times, let alone the developmental aspect of the society. So somewhere down the line, there's going to be clashes in the morals, and then which will push you towards changing the particular sector or the industry. So this is something that students and the new graduates should be really mindful of before entering private sector.
Okay. Yeah, please go, keep going. Yeah.
No, and secondly, one more point that I would really like to specify is that I also went independent, more into the private sector. And as Florian said, that, one really needs to be persistent and be really clear about the vision before entering into this, into a private sector or going independent. Like, you should know that this is something you believe in, this is something you want to do before taking anything on blindly, because then you don't want to start at a level down, realizing it later that, oh, I made a wrong decision, or I made a wrong choice. So be really sure about your vision, and maybe like the financial bit has to be taken a secondary seat while you're following your vision, just for a little while, because it needs a lot of patience when you're starting something new, going into the private sector or going independent. Not like financial bit won't improve, but your focus should mainly be on your vision that you believe in, and be persistent about it.
Thank you, Divya. Yeah, 3 seconds. So, when graduating from a program, there's very different tracks that open to you. And one of the things that is important, I guess, is to know who you are and what you want. And so that will help you getting the persistence that is needed in any of these tracks. Let me now turn to Pilkit. So Pilkit, there's 2 points I'd like to hear from you. The first one, your work is really very active in health policy. And we don't have health economics as a course at the institute. So I'm curious to hear how you found that the skill you got here could be applied on the context of health policy. And a related aspect, maybe another sub question, you have experience in working in larger organizations such as the World Bank, but also initiatives that are much more focused, for instance, Resolve to Save Lives. So these are both policy oriented institution, but different size, maybe different mandate. And I'd be curious to hear from you how you can contrast these 2 environments.
I think to answer your first question, when I entered the institute, I wasn't particularly proficient in statistical software use or topics in data science. And I think through coursework, I think it provided me an excellent platform to improve my coding skills and actually realize that I'm interested in looking at like data-driven policy making, not restricted to like you mentioned, button pushing econometrics or looking at stars or just rigor on your econometric finding, but beyond that as well. So it really allowed this coursework gave me like a good foundation to, for example, through impact evaluation, I really got a good head start in terms of learning R, and then using that at my day-to-day job and really building on that. Second thing, I think being at the institute were advantages, and even though we didn't have a health economics course, I made sure that I was auditing courses from like the main departments or other faculties. So I did course in medical anthropology and global health. So I was like trying to do coursework outside economics as well, just to have a broader perspective, which I think has been helpful graduating from the program, where I'm working with teams which are doing economic research, but also overlapping extensively with anthropology and political science and epidemiology now. So I think doing these coursework, so being at the institute helped in two ways. One was to build this quantitative rigor and knowing the tools to be able to do this kind of research, and then also giving access to coursework to a limited degree outside economics, which I have personally found to be helpful. And to answer your second question between the differences working at, let's say, the World Bank and the health organization I work for, I think I'm in my experience, I find there to be a trade-off between pushing for academic rigor and then the timely dissemination of findings. So at the World Bank, where I'm more focused on academic research, the focus is largely on improving and fine-tuning empirical rigor, and the secondary focus then the dissemination of findings and capacity building of stakeholders and implementing partners. Whereas with the health organization I'm working with, with whom I was working with, also on code, which made the task more time intensive, the priority was lesser on the finesse of your statistical findings, but rather the dissemination of them and putting more data out there which could inform policymakers and also like states and help them with capacity building, rather than fine-tuning this result and putting it forward once you've made sure that it matches all your benchmarks of rigor. So just a quick summary would be that I find my time at outside a research organization with more policy focus to focus more on dissemination, capacity building, and advocacy, compared to a research team where the focus is more on fine-tuning our outcomes for publishing and then seminars and things like that.
Thanks, Pulkit. So I think that's a very interesting point, and it shows that even within policy, which most of our interest, even there, it's a very varied field, and you can have segments that are more into academic oriented, to put it that way, and other segments that are more into timely deployment of the lesson learned, even if they're not as polished as the academic would want. So that shows you the very broad range of possibilities that you can get from a degree at the graduate institute. So this concludes the first two rounds among our panelists. Very much thanks. And we can now move to the question and answer segment of this discussion. And here, Pierre and Karine, I give you the floor. As if I'm not mistaken, you'll be moderating this.
Thank you, Cedric. I have a question. Well, you probably went into it already, all of you. It comes from Hugo, and the question is, what kind of specialization, I mean tracks, that's what we were talking about, did each of you choose? And also in which area was it particularly interesting for the job market? So your specialization, your tracks, and what in it was especially relevant for the job markets. Maybe Florian, no? We go around all of you, Florian, Satoshi, Divya, and then Pulkit maybe.
I don't know what's, I have to apologize. I don't know what's meant by specialization. Maybe that wasn't the thing when I studied, I don't know. Or
Where maybe sustainability or?
Yeah, I mean, like I took courses there, but it was like the program was international economics, right? That was it.
Yeah, I think what this meant is, so we now have this struct/specialization. So it could be, you know, micro/finance, development, or trade. I think that was meant in the what was meant in the question.
Okay, okay, perfect. Thank you. So I can't answer the question per se, but I mean, yes, I have specialized, you know, in questions around sustainability and the environment. And actually, I mean, I even so I started studying once I did med school first. So I wanted to become a doctor. And then I realized that I wanted to become an economist. There was like a whole story there in between, but I did my undergrad in Bern and in Toulouse for the reason that it allowed me to actually have a minor and to not, you know, do economics only. And so my minor was ecology and things related to climate change. And so I kept this at the institute as well. And I think that's something you know, perhaps, you know, beyond the pure choice of specialization that I found interesting. Like if you have a topic that you want to go after, I think the institute is a really nice environment because there is, I mean, there are a lot of events, so you can attend events, but then there's a whole Geneva community that I think the institute really tries to bring in-house, right? And it works very well, but you can also go out, right? You can also go out of the institute and go to these people and institutions. And particularly, I mean, around the topics you mentioned, Zurich, like you know, trade and development. There is so many specialists, you know, working around Geneva. I think, especially if you're, you know, mainly there to study and perhaps afterwards you're moving to another country to work, which is the case for a lot, was also for a lot of my fellow students the case. I think take the opportunity and don't only specialize like in terms of studies, but also specialize in terms of like where you go and like go talk to those people. Everybody knows the institute in Geneva, right? So you run into open doors. So I think that's something beyond like the specialization of the study program. You can think about, okay, but like who do I want to meet and like what organizations do I want to get to know? And this is a great opportunity that I think very few other universities actually offer, because the Graduate Institute is so well interconnected with a lot of other organizations that you really have a unique opportunity there beyond, you know, the study program per se.
Satoshi, would you like to add something?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think I I took the finance macroeconomics track when I was in the institute, but that was not really like, there was no like serious thinking behind it, because it was only because I started out my career as an investment banker, and I did finance for 3.5 years, and then I wouldn't say I was fed up with it, but I was more interested in like an impact investment, you know, what kind of how investment can, you know, contribute to like achieving societal goals that are, you know, hard to measure. And there was this like a consultancy firm in London who are who's just like, they are specialized in sort of translating the societal values into like a monetary terms, and basically to, you know, make the case that, you know, investing, for example, you know, the cultural heritage actually improves the, you know, the welfare, you know, living around those people, you know, etc. So I was kind of interested in that, and then I was looking for, you know, a lot of different courses, and I picked the institute, and I was fascinated by the, you know, all the world of, you know, empirical, you know, economics, and then I think in the end that really like helped me to like getting into the job that I do, because even though I think the OECD is not really specialized in, say, like running a regression and having, you know, doing the RCT to see the, you know, to discover the causality, but I think that's more, you know, I think World Bank I think has more resources to do that. OECD, I think we have a really great like data resources from our member states, and we have a lot of different things to do with our data. But a lot of things are at the descriptor level, but there are so many things you can still, well, if you actually have, I think a lot of economic students here, if you start writing master thesis, I think you will soon discover that running regression is not the hardest part. Getting the good descriptive statistics that give your audience a convincing case that that the variable of interest is that matters to your the dependent variable, that is actually the hardest part, and that remains the hardest part in the policy context as well. And yeah, I think overall in that regard, I think the education that I had at the institute really helped me to have that insight and employ that the skill into drafting policies and stuff. So yeah, I'm quite grateful, and I'm quite happy that I did.
Divya?
So my specialization was in international trade, and a concept that really helped me to choose, I would say, the current profession I'm in was the concept of comparative advantage, that a country should only manufacture things that it is comparatively better at, so that the trade is better between, so that it exports more to the other country. So I actually took that concept and I applied it on myself. So I realized that I have a comparative advantage of being a really good fitness professional, and it only came to me over the years. And my actually international trade made me realize that I should actually choose a profession that I'm good at to rope in the most benefits out of my life and the vision I have. So I use that concept in my life, and currently that's what I'm practicing. I'm in a profession that I am good at. So hoping to get better results. And I'm actually very happy about it, about choosing a different field. Not a different field, I won't say, because at the end, everything helps in, so economics I chose, that was also a strategic decision for me to get all the knowledge and the analytical and the strategic skills. So that has helped me into other areas of my life. So I won't say that I'm not doing economics. I'm just doing it in a slightly different way than other. I'm not running regressions and doing modeling, but it is really helping me in the current profession as well.
Thank you, Divya.
Thank you.
Pulkit, would you like to add something?
I think so. I did the development track, and given that my work roles are largely associated with what I studied, and so things like causal inference, methods in applied microeconometrics, and statistical software training, I think it's been really helpful, which were key elements of my specialization, which have been really helpful in helping me carry out my day-to-day work. And it's very closely connected to what I studied during my specialization. So I think it's been very instrumental in also helping me get these job roles, like through in the form of interviews and coding examinations, which these courses prepared me well for, and also then performing well at the job itself.
Thank you so much. Pierre, do you have questions in the room? Because I have also plenty online. Tell me.
Yeah, I'm going to ask right now.
I see plenty of questions. So I let you the floor for a while and then I take it back.
Can you hear? Can you hear the students asking the question? No.
So if I speak to the
Yeah,
laptop.
speak
Okay,
to the left.
So my question is, what made you go into a policy or private independent or academia? And what made you go into that area? And also, were there anything unexpected or challenging that you did not see before going into that field?
Who wants to take this question?
Yeah.
Who feel at ease to answer this question?
Can we maybe take a couple of questions and then because often they're connected, right? So
good idea. Good idea. So I have here online one from Nivedita, who's asking, well, who thanks you first of all, and then is asking if you can share some specific tip for job search, especially on the trade-off between applying to entry-level jobs in broad teams versus applying to specific economic roles.
Then we have another question here.
Hi, I actually have a few. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, feel free to ask. Yeah.
So, everyone talked a lot about what they like the skills they learned at the Graduate Institute that helped them. I'm more curious, what did you not learn at the Graduate Institute that either you would have liked to have learned or you would recommend that we sort of work on our own? Second, I was also curious, Florian mentioned that we should be going out into Geneva and finding people because doors are open and people can talk to us. But like, you know, there's a big gate in front of the Palais des Nations. So how exactly do we go about doing that? How do we do this network expanding activity? And lastly, I'm sorry, I last one, I swear. Pulkit, I hope I'm pronouncing that at least close to right. I was just wondering, I believe consultant is in your job title, and I hear that word bandied around in Geneva a lot, but I haven't really gotten a good explanation of what it means. So can you tell us a little more about what being a consultant in an international organization is?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry if that was too many questions.
Thank you so much. And then we still have here two others, which goes also with the other questions we already have. Would any of you say not having a PhD has been a burden at any point? So maybe, yeah, all of you can answer, even Florian, as you are doing a PhD. And then we have another one from Ariana to Satoshi, just to know if you first did an internship at the OECD and how has been the experience at working at this organization.
And please try to keep your responses as brief as possible. Thank you. Okay, I'll start. So I think, I mean, I'll just do, I'm not going to say exactly which question it is. I think it's going to touch on many of them. So one was on choosing kind of entry level jobs. And I think it's very much linked to choosing fields. And I think my principle, and I've also worked out of academia, I've worked in consulting, I've actually worked for the OECD as well. So my principle has always been choose a team where you think you learn. And the job title doesn't really matter. I think it doesn't matter for 5 years following your degree or so. I think if you go to places where you learn, you'll advance afterwards. So I wouldn't worry too much whether you're a junior economist, a consultant, or what the exact title is, but I would worry about are you replicating stuff that you already know? Then I would probably not do it. Or are you learning things? And that can be, technical skills if you want to improve, but that can be also interpersonal skills. That can be, learning about policy environments, etc. And I would go where you learn. On linked to that, what do I think I didn't learn at the Institute? One thing that I really didn't learn, I think, is presenting and pitching things concisely. And really, I mean, making it's dumb things, making nice slides. Don't put bullets on slides. Like, tell a story, show pictures. And the economists are economists won't like it if you present that way, because you need to be very concise and precise. And that's also, there's tremendous value in that. But beware that if you have to bring an idea across to somebody outside of that very specialized field, I think you need to tell a story, and it needs to be a good story, and you need to somehow connect to this person. So that's something I didn't learn. And then quickly on the last 2 points, expanding networks. I think you can be blunt. Like if you're at the panel and you hear somebody speak, you think he or she's interesting, go up to the person and say, hey, it's really nice. I like that thought. Like, would you mind grabbing a coffee next week? And most people will say yes. If you know a particular team or a particular person that's very interesting, ask your professor. Like if it's somebody at behind the United Nations gate, most likely your professor will know somebody in the same team or in a related team, and you say, hey, I read this report by XY, I would really like to speak to that person. I'm sure your professor can at least give you an email address of somebody who's close to that person. So, make use of these things. And the last one because I also did an internship at the OECD. Actually, I did the one through the Graduate Institute, which I found really cool. So there is, I don't know if that still exists, but there was an opportunity to go through the Graduate Institute to the OECD, and I also stayed on there afterwards a little bit. And I mean, I really appreciate it. I think it's a lot of good technical skills and a bit of exposure to the political reality of things. So I think it's a very good mix also to start a career. I think it's a very nice place. And importantly, they actually pay reasonable salaries, because that's one of the big problems in Geneva in entry-level jobs. A lot of entry-level jobs are very poorly paid, and the OECD actually pays reasonably, which is nice, I think.
Pays reasonably, but it's 700 euros per month, so you can't pay the rent. But
that's for the internship, not if you're working there as a consultant.
Like a consultant, yeah, you can get a decent salary. Yes, that's true. Okay. Yeah, I'll try to touch on as many items as possible in a concise way, which I didn't learn at the institute, but I'll endeavor. So what is the unexpected thing in my career? So it was quite unexpected to get into the OECD intern position, which was to assess the performance of international organization. That was the first division that I got into, and they basically looked at my career, looked at my CV, and they thought that because I worked in the bank, I worked as a credit risk analyst. We know, like, when you try to make a credit card, you send your profile, and then your bank will come back to you with a the limit, right? And that's exactly what I used to do, except that I did that for companies. And so they were really interested in how some of the corporations can be ranked, evaluated, given certain rank, like a AAA, AA, and stuff like that. And they wanted to sort of have a have that insight in their work. So that is why I was invited. First was a little bit unexpected, because I applied for a different position through the OECD, through the Graduate Institute's internship program at the OECD. So that was unexpected. Another unexpected thing is that I got into this position as a junior economist on the labor economics, because I really didn't have a background, but just because I did work with Ugo Panizza, and then the stuff that I did for my master thesis, which is somewhat related to the economics of education, which is vaguely related to what they were doing. So that was why I was sort of hired. I actually got offers from 5 different positions at the OECD, and that was I wasn't really sure that this division was really the one that I really wanted to go to, but I wasn't quite sure that if I got into, but I got into it in the end. So make sure like whatever you do, like do it with a care. Like something you've done will pay back. If you don't do much, nothing will stick to you in your career. Certainly in a few years, it will come off from your body. So you can remember that. What I did not learn, I already mentioned that. Not having a PhD burden. I wouldn't say if you work as a policy analyst, at least in the OECD, but if you want to be like, you want to present yourself as a specialist in the field, then you definitely need a PhD. But I have seen quite a few people who did acquire expertise through the work. So it really depends on it. I wouldn't say like getting a PhD doesn't give you like automatic expertise. You still have to work on it. I mean, it's just a certificate, right? So it's really depends on how you explore your career. Other than that, yeah. How did I? Yeah. And study show, are you interested? Yeah. Oh yeah. So I have to talk about this. So how did I find the OECD internship opportunity? Yes, I applied through the school, And if you had a chance, I really recommend that you do it, because the applications coming from the, from the partner universities we call at the OECD are the ones first reviewed when are reviewed in the beginning. So there's a winter internship and summer internship, and the school partnership universities application coming in the form of PDF, like 400 pages, 500 pages or something, in a chunk. And each school has like a 10 applicants, and you try to sort out as much as possible, because those are supposedly really good students. So they a lot of division try to scrum those applications, try to get them on the interview in the first shot. So of course, there's a way to apply via like a normal procedure, but I have to say, unless you really reach out to the teams that you're applying for, the chances are you're probably not going to hear them back, even if you went through the first selection process. So you want to be a little bit mindful of that. Can I add one more thing? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, don't worry. I'm gonna mute myself.
Divya or Pulkit, would you like to add a word on these questions?
Yes, so I'll first start with how to open doors for different institutions around different multilateral organizations. So adding on to the points already spoken, I would really like to say that people should really make use of the career services, because that's how I got my first internship at WTO. I reached out to the career services and asked them for a list of email IDs and, of the alumni. And they were kind enough to send me, and I stated these are the organizations I want to work for. So they sent me a list of all the people, and then I emailed all of them, found them on LinkedIn, and and it was so nice. I think almost all of them, 99% of them replied. I went for coffees with them. I went to World Economic Forum, WTO, not ILO. ILO came in later, but I went to WTO, I went to WIPO, and that's how I ended up my internship at WTO. Through one of the alumni who's already working in the research department. Secondly, so please, I think every student should make sure, because we have amazing people working across different multilateral organizations in private sector. So please make sure you use that. Secondly, definitely use LinkedIn. Figure out, like you can find people easily on LinkedIn, and just a small message, a two-liner introducing yourself when you connect with them. And secondly, when they accept your invitation of connection, which they will, given that you're in the same sector, then you should send a small paragraph as to why you're suited to that particular internship, what interests you, like a very small paragraph. So that can also really help. That helped me even in India when I came and applied to different private sectors. That's how I landed my brand management job, because getting into a management position without a B school degree is very tough. So LinkedIn really helped me, and the right communication, of course. And ILO and WTO, ILO had, how I got into ILO was they have the internship program. So I applied online and I had 2 interviews. So that's how I got into that. Secondly, about not having a PhD. So I did not have to worry about that, because I went into the private sector. So not having a PhD was not a burden for me. And am I allowed to answer one more question, or should I cut? Because I have answered to one more.
Very briefly.
Because okay, so the last was the first question, which was how did I choose private sector? How did one choose private sector? So I always knew that I had to go independent. So it was quite a flow for me to do economics, and so going independent also means that you need to have a wide range of skills and to understand human behavior as well. So doing economics, working in the multilateral organizations and NGOs was a way for me to become independent, and then taking the private sector route to go independent. So it was all in a flow for me. So I always knew that this is where I'm going to be. Thank you.
Pulkit finally, and then
I'll try to be very concise. I think one advice I'd have for everyone is that something I employed is that Geneva has a lot of diverse organizations. Like you have organization in trade, development, finance, impact investing, startups, and through my journey, I thought it was very helpful for me to get these diverse experiences while I was studying. So I worked for a small science policy interface team for a startup for a bit in Geneva. So I think to tap into these diverse experiences, especially while you're doing a master's and before you enter like a full-time job, and especially how strategically placed the institute is, was particularly helpful for me. And I'd highly recommend that. It's interested in gaining a diverse set of experiences that you can really dip your toes and understand what you like and what you don't like, rather than just because you're studying economics doesn't mean that you have to be driven to do academic research or applied research. So dipping your toes in different tech fields was really helpful for me. I think just to answer someone's question about what a consultant really means. So in my understanding is that it's like it's a glorified entry level position, which is and it really depends across teams and across organizations. But for example, the World Bank, it's essentially like just slightly above an entry level position where I'm currently working. So, and I found it, I echo Satoshi's sentiments about not having a PhD being disadvantageous, because I've seen people in my team and others around me who've worked for a few years and develop a course like specialization who haven't really required a PhD to progress further in the organization, also do research on their own. So I think I think that's it from my side. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here today. What I keep in mind from, I'm sorry, but I have another conference in my ears, so it's a bit hard to know who I'm talking about. So I just want to give the floor back to Cedric regarding the PhD, maybe for a position within the IMF or the World Bank. I just take back from this Alumni Week and all the different roundtables we had this week that probably passion, transdisciplinarity and network, and thank you, Divya, for your kind words. Because I'm super proud because I signed the partnership with the OECD 10 years ago. So I'm super happy that it's still available for you guys. And also for the alumni network, we have 22,000 alumni around the world, and half of them are in Switzerland. So please do as Divya did, ask us who is where, and so we can put you in touch all together. Florian, I'll see you next week in Zurich. We have a roundtable with Professor Sussman on impact investing with Andrea Meschler, who is the first woman who is at the SNB board, the Swiss National Bank board. She's an alumna. We will have also Mary Owens-Thompson, who is the economic in chief of YATA. So it will be a great event. I'm looking forward to it. And please, Cedric, take the floor and have the final words. Thanks to all of you for being here today. It was a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karin. So also totally second your thanks. Let me say a few things about the need for a PhD. So if you want to go for a career like a place like the IMF or central banks and the research department, you need a PhD. That's clearly. This said, this position also have position for masters, and what the form it takes is essentially a research assistant position. So you go there, spend 2 years working as a research assistant. You get a very good experience in applying what you've learned here, building a network, and then you apply and go through a PhD. Many policy institutions operate that way. So even though a PhD is what you will need ultimately to do a career there, it doesn't mean there is no opportunity for master, quite the opposite. This will tend more to be short-term positions, so a springboard for further step, but it's a springboard where you don't just work to get a salary, you actually learn very good applied skills there. So that would be, in a nutshell, the point. So thanks a lot to also all panelists for taking the time to join us in this conversation. And with this, Pierre, I give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for attending. Just the talk has been recorded, so you'll be able to see it on YouTube, should you like, on the Institute's channel. And yeah, thank you for listening. Just a quick word, you can always email our email address, so alumni@graduateinstitute.ch if you have any further question. And also feel free to use the alumni services that we provide. So if you're interested in a particular position, a particular organization, reach out to us. It's crazy, but not many students do it in the end. And it's really a simple step. So feel free to use this. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much to all the panelists for taking the time to join us today. And I wish you a pleasant afternoon and a pleasant weekend as well.